On March 21st, 1998, in Puerto Rico, the Bradley family from Chesterfield, Virginia, was preparing to set out on what they believed would be a dream Caribbean cruise, a vacation they expected to remember for the rest of their lives. The family consisted of parents Ron and Iva Bradley, their 21-year-old son Brad, and their daughter Amy, who was just days away from turning 24. They were an extremely close-knit family. Amy and her younger brother Brad, in particular, shared a bond that went far beyond that of ordinary siblings. They were more like best friends. The cruise tickets had been a gift from the company where Ron Bradley worked, making this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the family. They would be sailing aboard the luxurious Rhapsody of the Seas, a cruise ship capable of carrying around 3,000 passengers, departing from Puerto Rico and traveling through the Caribbean, including Aruba. Amy Lynn Bradley had once worked as a swim team coach and was also a talented multi-sport athlete who had earned a number of impressive achievements. After graduating from high school, she received several scholarship offers from different colleges. However, determined to pursue a degree in sports science, Amy ultimately chose to attend a university close to her family home in Virginia. With only a few months remaining before she planned to return to school to begin her master's degree, Amy felt that she could not pass up such a valuable opportunity to spend quality time with her family. The vacation was supposed to give Amy, and those closest to her, one more chance to relax and enjoy each other's company before she returned to her studies. Despite being an excellent swimmer, Amy did not particularly like the ocean. Even so, she eventually agreed to join her family on the cruise. 2 days after the trip began, on March 23rd, the Bradley family had dinner together. That evening was formal night aboard the ship, and Amy attracted a noticeable amount of attention from both fellow passengers and members of the crew, including musicians from the ship's band. Amy and her brother Brad also posed for several official photographs taken by one of the cruise ship's photographers. These pictures would later be displayed on board, so passengers could purchase them as souvenirs. In the photographs, Amy and Brad were dressed in formal clothing and posed near one of the ship's staircases. While the photographs were being taken, Iva later recalled that a waiter approached the family's dinner table and asked whether he could speak with Amy.
He said, "Where is Amy?" We said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, we want to take her to Carlos and Charlie's." And I said, "Well, she's with her brother." That was the end of that.
Amy's mother immediately found the invitation strange. When Amy and Brad returned to the table, Iva told them what had happened. Amy agreed that the request seemed unusual and assured her mother that she had absolutely no intention of leaving the ship. After dinner, the entire family went to the cruise ship's nightclub. Several crew members they had seen earlier that evening were also there, including members of the ship's band. At around 1 o'clock in the morning, Ron and Iva decided to return to their cabin and get some rest. Amy and Brad stayed behind with members of the band. Before leaving, Amy's mother kissed her daughter, told her that she loved her, and said she would see her again in the morning. At around 4 o'clock in the morning, Brad became tired and returned to the cabin he shared with his family. Approximately 15 minutes later, Amy also came back. The brother and sister sat outside on the cabin balcony.
They talked for a while, and they talked about what they were going to do on Curaçao.
Eventually, Brad went inside and fell asleep, leaving Amy alone on the balcony. When Ron Bradley woke sometime after 5 o'clock in the morning, he later said that he could still see Amy outside on the balcony. Knowing that both of his children had safely returned to the cabin, Ron felt reassured and went back to sleep. But only about 30 minutes later, when the family woke again, Amy was no longer on the balcony. She was not in her bed either. All of Amy's personal belongings were still inside the cabin. The only things that appeared to be missing with her were her cigarettes and a lighter. Even Amy's shoes were still there. What could possibly have happened in just 30 minutes? At first, Ron believed that Amy might simply have gone up to the main deck. But after more than an hour of searching, the family began to realize that she seemed to have completely vanished.
So he starts looking. He's unable to spot her, and then he becomes a little bit concerned.
Nearly 2 hours after Amy had last been seen, The captain finally authorized an announcement over the ship's public address system, asking Amy Bradley to report to the guest services desk.
We went up and looked around the disco and all the different floors, and you realize it wasn't just an everyday situation.
I don't know how to describe the feeling. It was just helplessness and frantic at the same time.
Amy's parents were becoming increasingly terrified. By this point, the ship had already arrived in port, and passengers were preparing to disembark. The Bradley family understood that if thousands of people were allowed to leave the ship and disappear into the streets on shore, finding Amy would become dramatically more difficult. Their panic intensified when the captain informed them that, regardless of what was happening, passengers would still be allowed to leave the ship according to schedule. The doors opened, and thousands of passengers began pouring into the streets of Curaçao. After most of the passengers had left the ship, the captain and crew finally began conducting a more extensive search for Amy. Her mother, Iva, believed that her daughter's disappearance might somehow be connected to the unusual amount of attention Amy had received the night before. While Brad was searching for his sister, Alistair Douglas, the bass player from the ship's band, reportedly approached him and said that he was sorry to hear that Amy had gone missing.
The band member approached Brad and said, "Sorry to hear about your sister."
What struck Brad as strange was that, at that point, there had been no official announcement confirming that Amy was missing. According to the Bradley family, only the ship's captain and security team were aware of the situation. So Brad could not understand how Douglas already knew. That detail immediately made him uneasy. Alistair Douglas would later deny that the conversation had happened in the way the Bradley family described it.
It's odd that somebody would have this sort of inside knowledge into potentially Amy's whereabouts. She'd only just been reported missing, and the odds that this person would know that she's missing already seems very strange.
When people are giving cues about this or talking about inside details that no one has made public yet, it should really raise some red flags.
After nearly 12 hours of searching, the crew concluded.
Captain looks at us and says, "We have searched every nook and cranny of this ship, and Amy is not on the ship."
Amy was no longer aboard the ship. When her parents asked the captain to make an official announcement stating that Amy was missing, he refused, reportedly saying that doing so could disturb or inconvenience the other passengers. Members of the crew raised the possibility that Amy might have fallen overboard or taken her own life, but the Bradley family strongly rejected both theories. Amy did not like the ocean. According to her family, she would never voluntarily stand dangerously close to the ship's railing. Because of that, they believed the possibility that she had accidentally fallen into the water was extremely unlikely. Amy had also been happy and excited about her future. She was preparing to continue her education, and her family had seen no indication whatsoever that she intended to take her own life. The ship was scheduled to continue its journey in only about 4 hours. The captain informed the Bradley family that they had to make a choice, either leave the ship or remain on board. Even though the crew insisted that Amy was no longer on the vessel, the decision was agonizing. In the end, the family chose to disembark in Curaçao. They stood there and watched as the cruise ship pulled away from the port and continued towards St. Thomas without them.
Here we are, we're stranded in this place.
They immediately contacted the FBI and pleaded for help. The FBI instructed the family to fly to St. Thomas and find a way to get back on board the ship. At the family's request, the FBI also contacted the cruise line directly. After asking further questions, agents uncovered something deeply troubling. The earlier search for Amy on board the ship had apparently not been nearly as thorough or comprehensive as the family had been led to believe. Precious time had been lost. What had begun as a dream vacation had now become a living nightmare for the Bradley family. By March 26th, when FBI agents officially boarded the ship, Amy's disappearance was finally being investigated as a missing person case. And that was when the circumstances began to grow even more suspicious. The photographer who had taken the formal pictures of Amy and Brad.
All of Amy and Brad's pictures were gone out of the gallery a few hours after they were put up. Why were Amy's pictures missing? Just not there. And then something happened that was particularly haunting. There was a videographer.
Then, 2 visibly shaken witnesses came forward with information. They claimed that at approximately 5:45 in the morning, they had seen Amy step out of an elevator and return to the nightclub with Alistair Douglas. If their account was accurate, Douglas may have been the last known person seen with Amy. Based on that information, he was asked to take a polygraph examination. Douglas passed the test. There was also a videographer on board the cruise ship whose job was to record passengers and activities during the voyage for promotional footage. And completely by chance,
There was a videographer. He found video of Amy and this band member in the disco together.
that videographer had captured Amy on camera that very morning. Amy had disappeared after reportedly being seen dancing in the nightclub with the band's bass player. When the ship's videographer realized that he had unintentionally recorded footage of Amy on the morning she vanished, he immediately turned over all of the footage to the ship's security team, intending for it to be passed on to the FBI. But for reasons that remain unclear, that never happened. It would be more than a year before the footage finally came to light. As soon as the cruise ended, the Bradley family returned to Curaçao to continue searching for Amy. There, a local taxi driver told them that on the morning Amy disappeared, just as passengers were beginning to leave the ship, a young woman resembling Amy had run toward his cab and asked where she could find the nearest telephone. The driver's description of Amy's appearance was so detailed that the Bradley family became convinced that the woman he had seen really was her. The driver also pointed them toward 3 specific locations on the island where he believed they should search. But after checking all 3 places, the family found no trace of Amy. They had been on the island for 4 days when something else happened. While driving around searching, Brad suddenly heard a voice that sounded incredibly familiar. He became convinced that it was Amy calling his name. Brad and his family immediately followed a van that he believed the voice had come from. But when they finally caught up with it, there was only a driver inside. Brad would later admit that he did not know whether they had followed the wrong vehicle or whether he had simply heard what he desperately wanted to hear. Eventually, after days of physical and emotional exhaustion, the Bradley family was forced to leave Curaçao and return home to Virginia. But then another witness came forward. In August of 1998, a Canadian tourist named David Carmichael traveled to Curaçao. He later claimed that he had come face to face with Amy Bradley. David recalled,
"We were over in a small area where we wash off the equipment in fresh water. And I looked down the beach and I saw a girl walking down the beach with being flanked by 2 people. The minute she heard I spoke English, she picked up her pace and was putting distance between her and the 2 people that were flanking her. Within what was probably seconds, she was within 3 or 4 feet of me."
David noticed that the woman had a scar on her right shin. She also appeared to deliberately position herself in a way that allowed him to see several tattoos on her body. David later insisted,
"That's how close I was. I don't even have to think about it. It's 100%. It's not 99. It's 100. It's 100%. It was her. It was."
David also later stated that one of the 2 men accompanying the woman resembled the description of Alistair Douglas, the bass player from the cruise ship's band. The accounts from the taxi driver and David Carmichael only reinforced the Bradley family's original fear. Amy may have been abducted, forced off the ship, and held somewhere on the island against her will. From that point forward, disturbing theories involving forced prostitution and human trafficking began to emerge. By the fall of 1999, the Bradley family finally believed they had been given a possible ray of hope. They were contacted by a private investigator named Frank Jones. Jones claimed to be a former member of the United States military's Special Forces. He appeared extremely eager to help the family and insisted that he had the resources, experience, and support of former Ranger associates needed to locate and rescue Amy. Jones told the family that he had received information from an inside source named Margarita, who worked as a cook. According to Margarita, Amy was being held inside a compound, surrounded by barbed wire fencing and guarded by men. She claimed that she regularly saw Amy shopping and exercising, but Amy was never alone. She was always accompanied by a man with long blonde hair. Even more strikingly, Margarita was reportedly able to describe several of Amy's tattoos with considerable accuracy. The Bradley family believed the lead was far too important to ignore. Over the next several years, Ron, Iva, friends, relatives, and even Ron's former employer contributed a total of approximately $210,000 to Frank Jones. The money was supposedly being used to prepare an elaborate search and rescue operation. Jones also sent the family several photographs showing a woman on a beach standing beside a man with long blonde hair. The woman's build strongly resembled Amy. More importantly, she appeared to have a tattoo on her ankle similar to Amy's. For the first time in a long while, Ron and Iva truly believed their daughter might still be alive. But then all of that hope collapsed. The truth finally came out. Frank Jones was, in fact, a cold and calculating con man. He had never served in the military. Much of the money the Bradley family had given him had simply been used to finance Jones's own extended vacations. The photographs he had sent the family were completely staged. The woman in the pictures was a model. The man beside her was wearing a blonde wig. Even the tattoo on the woman's ankle was fake. Margarita was lying as well. She had received approximately $8,000 from the Bradley family. The truth only began to surface when another private investigator and trusted friend of the Bradley family, Tim Buchholz, started paying closer attention to Jones's behavior. Tim quietly monitored him for an extended period of time. Once he had gathered enough information, he contacted the Bradley family and told them the truth about the man in whom they had placed so much trust. The family was devastated. In February of 2002, Frank Jones was indicted for defrauding both the Bradley family and the National Missing Children's Organization. He pleaded guilty to mail fraud and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The court also ordered him to repay the money he had taken. Ron Bradley later said, "If it were your child, what would you do? I think we chose to take the gamble, and in the end, we lost." But that was not the only lead. Another piece of information was later passed to the FBI, once again involving Curaçao. In 1999, a United States Navy officer visited a brothel on the island. He claimed that while he was there, a woman walked directly up to him, grabbed his arm, and told him that her name was Amy Bradley. She said that she needed help, and that she was being held against her will. But the officer did not report the encounter to anyone. He was reportedly afraid of the consequences he might face if his superiors discovered that he had visited a brothel while on duty. By the time the FBI finally learned about the incident, it was too late. The brothel had burned down. There was no evidence left, and no additional witnesses could be located. Another highly significant lead emerged in 2005. The Bradley family received an anonymously submitted photograph. The image showed a woman using the name Jazz on a Caribbean escort service website. A forensic expert compared photographs of the woman with images of Amy taken 7 years earlier. He concluded that the woman in the photograph was Amy. He reportedly felt so strongly about his conclusion that he said he was willing to stake his professional reputation on it. The image later received widespread public attention when Amy's case was featured on Dr. Phil in November of 2005. That same year, another woman named Judy Mora claimed that she had seen Amy inside a public restroom at a department store in Barbados. According to Judy, the woman was being closely watched by 3 men. The men repeatedly threatened her, apparently to make sure she followed through with some kind of arrangement. When they temporarily stepped away, Judy immediately approached the woman and tried to help. The woman told her that her name was Amy. She then began saying that she was from Virginia. But before she could explain anything further, the men returned and pulled her away. Over the years, there have been numerous reported sightings of Amy, suspicious photographs, and age-progressed images showing what she might look like today. Yet Amy has never been found. No one has ever been charged in connection with the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. 12 years after Amy vanished in 1998, she was legally declared dead on March 24, 2010. But for the Bradley family, the story has never truly ended. They continue to pray every day that, somehow, they will eventually learn the truth about what happened to their daughter. The FBI continues to accept any information that could help shed light on the case. The story of Amy Lynn Bradley is more than just an unsolved mystery. It is also a reminder of the importance of attention, responsibility, and compassion. Sometimes, a single piece of information reported sooner, a warning taken more seriously, or one person choosing to speak up at the right moment can change the course of an entire life. For families with a missing loved one, what they need is not only answers, but also the support of the people around them. And until the truth is finally known, hope may be the one thing that should never be taken away.